Okay, so different types of objectives. Marketing objectives might be things to do with product pricing, distribution, return on investment, those types of things. Marketing communication objectives are different. They are about awareness, attention, personality, repositioning. And brand objectives cover usage and preference. So when you're drawing up objectives, they need to link to key issues, but they need to be addressing a certain something. Okay? Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-yes. So in other words, if I start writing objectives, I need to measure them against SMART. If I can't answer all of these questions, rewrite them, because they're not SMART. And when you get to the panel's going to say to you, but listen, this is not making sense to me. So save yourself the trouble and do it yourself. Measure it up against SMART. If you can't answer a question, re-look at it. How do I rewrite this to make it attainable? How do I measure it? Okay.
What determines, is it realistic?
I'll talk about realistic now. Okay. So a tool that you can use to help you to start creating SMART objectives is the 5W and H. You've heard of this tool?
Yes.
So I'm going to quickly go. What am I going to do? So I'm going to conduct, I'm going to develop, I'm going to plan, I'm going to execute. Why is it important for me to do this? Who is going to do it? Who else do I need to involve? When do I want this to be completed? So deadline driven. And how am I going to do this? Okay, so it's a tool to help you to ask the right questions, to create an objective that becomes SMART. Your objectives should be all of the following. They should be concrete, detailed, focused, well-defined, action-oriented. Okay, what is the outcome?
What's the other W?
Yeah.
Did I miss one? Only Bogosi would pick that up.
No, SK also.
Ah.
J.
Yeah, Jerry.
What, why, who, when, where.
Right.
Where, okay, so I missed where. Well spotted, guys. Okay, so where would talk to what?
Where would be implemented?
Where would I maybe conduct my research?
Yeah.
Those types of things. Okay. Okay, so let's look at each one in turn, and I'm going to quickly skim through these. Okay. Objective should state exactly what's to be achieved. High sales is not a SMART objective. What does high sales mean? It means nothing.
So
I want to achieve higher sales.
20%.
So would you say increase sales by 20% by December, end of
2013.
December, yeah. 2013.
Absolutely. So you guys want this girl on your team. I want to increase sales from an average of 100 vehicles per month to 150 vehicles. This is also measurable. 100 vehicles to 150. I can see what's happening. It's specific enough. I know exactly what I want to achieve. How much extra income do you want? What increase in web traffic do I need? How many more cars do you want to sell? Where are you now? I'm now at 100. I want to be at 150. Does this make sense?
I'm sorry, does the client actually give us a pack of, not research, like can we ask for surveys and that kind of thing of how many customers they have, for instance?
They might give you some of that in the brief. It depends on what the brief is. So you'll have to play it by ear when you get there.
Okay.
So Kwanela asked earlier, do they give you research? It depends on what the brief is, what they're asking you to do, what the brand is, whether they've done stuff before. You might only decide, once you've done a bit of research, that you need more information. So it's a bit hard to tell at the beginning.
Situation.
Okay, measurable. Makes sense? If I can't measure it, I can't manage it. So I need to know from 100 to 150 vehicles. How do I know how far I am? Can be motivating. So if I want to get from 100 to 150 vehicles in 3 months, and in my first month I get to 120, I can immediately see, what have I done that's changed? Why have I done, and how much is left? Does that make sense? So it allows me to monitor what's happening. Let's say I put a chain in place that I'm going to do over a 3-month period, from 100 to 150. I get to the end of 3 months, but I'm only sitting on 140. Already I can see I need to do something to get, I need to maybe extend the deadline, do something different. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, what are you measuring? To increase awareness is not measurable. What does that mean? Awareness. Increase awareness, specific target market, from that to that. That I can measure.
But then how do you quantify awareness? Like, do you do surveys?
It couldn't it be like on the internet, how many hits you get, for instance, on the
It's all part
website?
of your research. So of the 200 people, school children that I interviewed, only 20% of those school children know about my brand. Does that
But
make
then
sense?
that means the second time around you have to go to the same school.
How do you measure it? You do it again. After your campaign, you do it again. There's a lot of work involved in this, hey? It's not just, well, we've reached 40%. How do you know? You have to do it again. Your research. Okay. I want to lose 10 kgs this week. Is that realistic?
This week, no.
This week, no. Why?
It's impossible. Time frame is not.
Unless you do the
No.
whole group diet thing.
Okay, yes. Unless I have the resources, think about this now. Do I have the right circumstances and the right resources? I can do it.
No.
But this is not realistic, guys. So when you're presenting objectives,
Even, I don't think even gastric bypass can be that quick.
liposuction,
Yeah.
come on, you must think of these things. Think outside the box. So if I'm presenting a set of objectives, let's say I say I want to train 5,000 people across the country to sell a particular product in 2 months. 5,000 people in 2 months across the country. How realistic is that?
Unless you have intense resources.
Unless you have intense resources. Does that answer your questions? How do you decide it's realistic?
It depends.
Think about it. Think about what's available to you. What is it that I need to do? And then decide if it's realistic or not. So, to increase sales from 100 units to 120 units is attainable if the economy is strong. But maybe it's not attainable if the economy is weak. So you need to look at what's happening to decide what becomes then realistic or not.
Yes.
From your, yes, your macro.
Yeah.
Does make sense, guys?
Yes.
Okay. Relevant, in other words, it must be relevant to the people that I'm talking to. So, achieving awareness is not relevant to the production department, the people who make my product. Just like improved fuel efficiencies is not relevant to the communications department. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I am communications. I tell people about this brand. Why do I care that it's, unless I can use it as part of my campaign? So your objectives must be relevant under those circumstances. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, it must be relevant to the key issues facing the brand. It must be challenging. To change the brand personality from old and boring to fun to be with is challenging, but realistic for a brand that is losing market share because it has a poor brand image. Does that make sense? So it's a challenging objective, but it's something that I can achieve over a certain period of time. And then finally, time related. Obviously, I want to do this within a certain period of time. I want to do this within the next 3 months, or whatever it is. Otherwise, how do I know when I get there? And if you're working, you guys know, if you're working towards a specific deadline, you're much more inclined, the closer you get to your deadline to work on that, the harder you work on that. Does that make sense? So I need to know what the deadline is. What am I trying to achieve? Realistic? To achieve 50% of market share within a year is not realistic for a brand new brand because there's a lot that needs to be done before I can get to 50%. Does that make sense? So you look at the brand and the brief. Examples of SMART objectives. Profitability objectives. To achieve a 20% return on capital by that date. I'm just going to skim through these quickly. Market share objectives. 25% of the market for sports shoes by a certain date. Growth. Increase the size of our Cape operation from that to that. See, I'm giving myself time. I'm giving myself 2 years or 3 years to achieve that, because that's a big leap. Realistic. Promotional objectives. Let's just quickly look through these. Awareness of what, where, from that to that, by a specific timeline. You see that each of those fulfills the SMART acronym that I use. Okay, so increased trial from that to that by then. Favorability towards a brand from there to there within. You guys get the idea? Branding objective and relating to preference. Okay. Communication objective. I want to contact all the voters in a particular area and give them information. I want to influence voters and get a certain percentage, so my communication objectives are to do these, and then I will then decide how do I do that. Advertising objectives. Obviously you remember, to inform, to persuade, to remind. Those are your basic advertising objectives. And I can do any of these things. I can create awareness, inform about a product, benefit, relate products to needs, modify attitudes, create an image. All of these things would be advertising objectives. Let's quickly look at examples of SMART objectives from a key issue. How can we change the perception of cards from expensive to affordable? So maybe a brand objective is to increase foot traffic. So the way for me to change perception is I want people to come into my store. How many people? I want to increase it by 20%. So I know what I'm starting with by that date. A communication objective might be to change the perception of expensive. These are actually out of the Cardi's brief. Okay, how do I do that? That comes next.
Yeah.
Okay, questions, guys?
Mm-hmm.